All right, everybody. I think I'm ready to get started. Don't have everybody on the call here. Okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and move forward. So I think the first thing to acknowledge is that we had a death in the community recently. That is, whether you were or were not friendly with Lovisa, if you knew her or did not, still very, very saddening. I know I'm personally having a tough day because of that, and among other things, and so just wanted to put it out there that if you are like if this day has been hard for you, or if these coming days are hard for you, even if you didn't personally know Lovisa, I think it's important to remember to be kind to yourself and be compassionate with yourself, and prioritize mental health above everything else. So I just want to put that out there before we get into the project kickoff. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about this next project. Which is going to be Adopt, Don't Shop. So this is linked in our projects index on our Mod2 projects page. The idea of this project is that we are building out functionality on a pet adoption platform. And give me 1 second to arrange. Excuse me. So we're building out functionality for this pet adoption platform. So users should be able to apply to adopt pets, and then admins would be able to approve or reject applications and see some statistics for those adoptions. This is built off of your relational Rails project. So this database design diagram should look familiar. So Jameson went through and built out relational Rails with these two relationships. So pets and shelters, and veterinarian offices and veterinarians. So yeah, you should be able to look at some of the existing code in this code base and see something very similar to what you all built for relational Rails. So something like, got a pets controller, and it's got all of your CRUD functionality in here. So if there's anything from that first project that you were curious about, you might find some examples in this repo. So let's talk about our main learning goals here. So the big one is build out CRUD functionality for a many-to-many relationship. Last project, we focused on one-to-many relationships. This project, we are layering on many-to-many relationships, and we'll have a class on that tomorrow morning. The other thing is that we're going to start writing active record queries that utilize joins. So a many-to-many is the database relationship that we are layering on, and then joins is the active record SQL concept that we are layering on as well. So those are two big learning goals. The second one, use MVC to organize code effectively. I think most folks did a pretty good job of that from what I saw in the project check-ins or the project evals today so far. So I think that this is one that we're going to continue to emphasize. And then I would say the rest of them are things that we are very like Rails specific things that we want you to know about. So validations, a big one. We have an example of that in some of our lesson plans. You might have seen validations. We're going to have a class on validations and kind of talk more about how you should use validations. Along with validations, we're going to have sad paths. So sad paths are when users don't use your application exactly how you would expect them to. How do you handle that? And then along with that are flash messages, where we will use these flash messages to give feedback to the user. We're also going to use partials in views. So partials are how we can dry up and break down our views. So some more view strategies, and then within blocks for your tests. Within blocks, we're covered in the HTML, CSS exploration and the testing best practices exploration. I dropped a message in the cohort channel. If you have not done those explorations, make sure you take some time to read through and work through those. There's some important information in there. And those are linked in the calendar event for today, HTML and CSS and testing explorations. The last two learning goals here are not code specific. So track user stories using GitHub projects. I believe you all should be familiar with GitHub projects. So this should be pretty straightforward for you all. I'll get to that later. And then we're going to deploy this application to Heroku. And I will reserve some time at the end to kind of go over Heroku. We're going to have one check-in for this project. What we're going to want to look at is your database schema for your many-to-many relationship, your Heroku deployment, and your GitHub projects board. And here's the rubric. Make sure that you are reading this rubric. I'm not going to go through all of it, but make sure that you're reading through this to know what we are expecting you to do in this project. For your evaluation, let me read through this. Yeah, so I think we're going to stick with this this evaluation format for this mod. So the format is you're going to choose 2 user stories to present in a small group. I think what we might do, I don't exactly know what the format is going to be for these evals, but they will be. You might, so this is going to be a solo project. We're most likely going to put you in at least a small group of 3 to 4 of your peers. Just hard with 29 of you all to give everyone their own 30-minute time slot. So we'll probably have you all go in small groups, and hopefully that will give you all a chance to like see some others code and give each other feedback in that way. Let's go to the calendar and talk about the timeline for this project. So here we are today on Thursday. So we're gonna have that many-to-many class tomorrow, and then you're gonna have the weekend. So we do expect you to make a pretty good amount of progress over the weekend. We don't have an exact like progress marker that we have, but I would say try to make the most of your time this weekend. I would say your weekend time should really like push you as far as you can so that you can be ready for your project check-in on Tuesday. So project check-ins, we really want you all to come prepared with questions. We're going to stick with the Once Hub scheduling for project check-ins, so those signups aren't live yet, but we'll probably make those live next week. This project is going to be due on Thursday evening, so 10 p.m. project due Thursday evening. You will notice that we have project evals on Thursday afternoon here, and we have project evals Friday morning here. So what that means is that some of you all will do your evals earlier than when the project is officially due. And I think the way that I would describe this is it is a project eval. We do want to give you scores, but especially in week 3 of the mod, we're still emphasizing your learning and your progress over everything. So your early eval, you should still be able to come ready to present a user story that was challenging for you and get some good feedback on it. And of course, you can continue to work on the following Friday, implement some of that feedback and maybe check with some of your peers or look at some of your other peers' code and kind of compare to what they did. So that's all just to say, like, I don't want you all to feel like if you do the project eval early that you are at a disadvantage because you aren't able to get as much done at this point in the mod. If you don't get the entire project done, that won't affect your promotion at the end of the mod. And I think that's everything for scheduling. Yeah. Any questions on anything I've covered so far? I will talk more about the GitHub projects and Heroku. One really important piece of advice that I have for you all, I mentioned, like, we want you to work over the weekend. We do want you to make progress over the weekend. Do your best to avoid unproductive struggle over the weekend. So have you all heard that term unproductive versus productive struggle before? Yeah. So we really don't want you to spend a lot of time not getting a lot done or not learning a lot. We want to make sure that your struggles are as productive as possible. Looking through some of these first user stories, some of them do cover concepts that, some of them utilize concepts that we have not covered yet. So for instance, starting an application form not complete, this is an example of a sad path. If I go back to the calendar, our sad paths class is on Tuesday. So what I would not want you to do is I would not want you to get to this user story of starting an application form not complete and say, oh, well, I can't do that yet, and then put down the project and not touch it. What I would prefer for you to do is to go on to another user story. So these user stories don't all have to be done exactly in order. So it's totally okay for you to do like application show page, starting an application, skip over form not complete. Maybe you skip over the, so maybe you do the searching for pets, but then there's some harder ones like partial matches and case insensitive matches. So maybe you could skip over these two when you get there and go straight to SQL only story. So that's just to say, like, make sure that you're using your time as effectively as possible. And if you get stuck on something, try something else, move on to something else and wait until you can get some help, get some feedback on it. Let's go ahead and take a look at the project board. So we're going to use conveyor belt for this project, which is going to fork this repo for you all, give you all your own copy of it, and it's going to copy over this project board for you. So this project board that I have for you, you'll get this project board that I have here, you'll get an exact copy on your repo. Can I get a thumbs up if you've all used GitHub GitHub projects? Cool. Okay. So it looks like most people have. So yeah, we do expect you to be using GitHub projects for this. Really what we want you to do is we want you to move these cards between these sections. So maybe my first story is deploy my application to Heroku. I merge it to main. There really is no code for Heroku, and I'll go straight to deployed. So that's like kind of a deploy your application to Heroku. Again, I'll talk more about Heroku, kind of a separate story. Application show page is probably a better example. So I pull this over here, I'm working on it. Then I merge it into my main branch, and then I deploy it to Heroku. And once it's in the deployed section, then it's officially done. So we're trying to not ask a lot of you in terms of this project board. We really just want you to use this to track your progress through the project. When it comes time for the group project in week 4, we want everybody to have some practice with this so that we can really just hit the ground running with this project board when we have a group working with it. Gunnar?
Yes, I haven't looked at the user stories in particular, like specifically, but I'm guessing each one of these tags is associated with like a user story, correct?
Yes. Sorry, I think I just stopped my screen share. So no. Yeah, so what you'll see is if I click on like starting an application right here, the text of the story will be right here on the side. And this corresponds to what I was showing you in the README. Mm-hmm. So the README is really just a copy of all those user stories.
Awesome. Okay, cool. That answered my question perfectly. Thank you.
You're welcome. Richard?
Is there a way to copy the base project from turning over to your own?
The project board?
Yeah, is there a way to like copy all these over? Or
there's not a way to do it manually. Yeah, there's not a way for you to do it, but we have a small app that will do it for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Susie?
So are you expecting pull requests for our own, like should we be doing pull requests and merging and things like on our own repo?
Yeah, I still recommend you use a pull request workflow. It's just when it comes to submit the pull request, you can create the pull request and merge it all at once. You don't need to review your own pull request.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And that's what we mean by merging to main here. You can merge to main from the command line and skip the GitHub pull request. Still recommend you do the pull request just to like stay in the habit. For some of these stories, I saw an example earlier, but some of the stories are marked. Well, actually, let's go back to the README for this. So the project board is really nice for like tracking your stories and tracking your project progress. And I just realized I don't want to unorder all of this. Let me undo that. 11, 12, 13. Yeah, let me put all these back, because it will copy it exactly as it is, and I want them to be in this order. Okay, so this project board is really helpful for like tracking the cards and moving them across. And this is very similar to what you will do on the job. Almost every software team will have some sort of like card tracking system. The README is a good place to get some additional information on these stories and see these stories grouped together. So you'll notice that the rubric references these sections. So it says all stories in deploy, apply for pets, database logic part 1, and approving applications. Those sections you can only find in this README. So here's database logic part 1, here's approving applications, et cetera, et cetera. For database logic, these ones, this is kind of similar to the active record sections in your first project in relational Rails, where we're trying to separate out those stories. I do want to make a note that some of them are, well, for this section, only one of them, but in later sections, there's more. Some of these stories are marked as SQL only. So we want you to practice writing raw SQL queries, and it tells you how to do this in here. You want to use the active record find by SQL method, and there is some more documentation linked here if you would like some additional references. But I just want to make sure that you all see that and know that that is indeed what we want you to do. We do want you to write at least one raw SQL query on this project. And I think that's it. There's some more information about the routing here, but I think this is good enough. You can read this when you get there. I just want to make sure you all know the README has some additional information that you'll want to read through. So be using the README and the project board together. And I think that's everything except for Heroku. So the next thing I want to do is kind of like a mini lesson on Heroku and your production environment. I think I'll take a palm before we do that. So are there any questions about anything we've covered besides Heroku up to this point? Joe?
Yeah, I was just taking a quick look at the sign-up sheet, and it looks like it's in the old format. I'm assuming those will probably be updated maybe today or tomorrow sometime.
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and take out that sign-up sheet right now, and we'll do the once hub scheduling again.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the calendar should be updated with that now. Other questions? Noah?
I looked at this a little bit earlier and saw that in the gem file lock for this project, it's kind of set so that the Ruby version is 2.5.3, which messed with my bundler. It was in the, yeah. Oh, there it is too, I suppose. It made my bundler not work, and I guess, is it preferable to bump this version to 2.7.2 as we've been using, or just use a different bundler?
I've been talking and I've been on mute. The proper thing to do would be to change the Ruby version. I think what I'll do is I'll just push a commit really quickly here to, I don't know, I think I'm just gonna do that right now. No reason y'all can't watch me do this. Yeah, so I'll do that. Regina.
Are we expected to use the tables that are examples up here? Is it okay to use them as they are? Are you wanting us to make our own tables?
So those tables that are in the diagram are, give me 1 second here. So those tables in the diagram are existing tables. So if I go into this project, and I open up DB schema, you'll see that those tables are already part of our schema. So you might need to change some things about them. You might need to add some things. You don't really need to touch veterinarians or veterinarian offices, but shelters and pets will be very, you'll need to use these two tables throughout your project. So yeah, they're already there. You might need to change some things, but they've already been created for you. Is that what you're asking?
There? Yes, I am asking. Thank you. Are there user stories that require? Is that part of the project to change them, or is that more of like personal preference that they might come up with something that we want to change?
I can't remember exactly. I don't think you have to change any of these tables. What you're going to focus on is you're going to focus on adding new tables that will create your many-to-many relationship. So
Okay.
I think the answer is you don't have to touch these tables to complete the project. I'm pretty sure that's right.
But we will be creating another set of tables. Is that what you're saying?
You will be creating more tables, yes.
Perfect. Thank you.
So let me go ahead and just show you all how this works. So in order to change my Ruby version, I'll just change this to 272 and go into this .ruby version file. This is how RBEM tracks your Ruby version. It just creates this hidden file. It's hidden because there's a dot in front of it. It just creates this file with your Ruby version. So if I change this to 272 and do a ruby-v, I should see I'm on Ruby 272. I should be able to bundle, and that should all work just fine. Joe?
We don't need to run the bundle update after that, correct?
No, you should not have to bundle update.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so that should be updated now. Any other questions? Molly?
Yeah, sorry, just piggybacking on Richard's question about copying the project over. Is that just in the walkthrough? I haven't actually had a chance to look at that yet, but or do we need, like, I just want to make sure.
Let's do it right now. I think this is a good time to do it. Yeah, and I think it'd be good for us to like stay on together. There it is. Okay. So I'm gonna make y'all's project 2103 adopt don't shop. And so the project board we are copying is this project board. Cool. And so now I will send this out into your cohort channel. And go ahead and click on that link and fill out that form. Please provide an email. If you don't, it just slows it down a little bit. So please provide an email and then put your name here, and that's all you should need to do. And We should see those coming over as you all fill them out. Cool. So I've already got Joe and Susie in here, and I see everybody coming. So after you fill that out, that should run in the background, and we can check up on it a little bit later. So what this will do is you can see it's like for Susie, for example, it created this whole project for Susie right here. And if I go over here, I can actually see, hopefully I see the app populating this with cards. So I can see these cards coming in. So if you want, you can look at your new repo and watch your cards come in. Super exciting. Let's go ahead and, oh, Zach, what's up?
So what if we already did all of that? Do we have to do the conveyor belt?
If you did what?
Created all the cards for the user stories in the GitHub repo.
If you did it yourself, then I think you're good to go. I don't think you'd need to do anything else.
Okay.
Okay, let's go ahead and take a POM here. Let's come back at 1:33, and then we'll talk about Heroku. All right, looks like conveyor belt is chugging along here. So some of you, it looks like it's finished. Some of you, it's still working. But I don't see any errors coming through for anybody. So I think that is good. Yeah. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about Heroku. So I'm going to do this as a whiteboard. Can I get some confirmation? Can you see me scribbling? Cool. Okay. So I'm going to talk about Heroku, and I'm going to talk maybe more specifically about your environments. So let's just put environments at the top here. So let's first cover what you have already done. So with every Rails interaction, there's two players in that action. There is the client and there's the server. So kind of thinking back to that how the web works class, we're going to have a client and we're going to have a server. They interact by the client sending to the server an HTTP request. In our case, our server is a running Rails server. So this could be a server in different languages. It could be using different tech stacks and all different things. For us specifically, we're running a Rails server. And our Rails server, so the way it works is it's going to get the request. It's going to route the request, trigger a controller action, potentially do some model database stuff, render a view, and then it's going to send back like this an HTTP response. And that HTTP response typically contains HTML, which is what the user sees, and that's what's displayed on the client. So maybe just some more information here. Our client is a web browser, and our server is a running Rails server. So think I type Rails S or Rails server from the command line. Okay. Feel free to put your hands up at any point if you have any questions or comments. So this is the very, very generalized, very generalized diagram. We have 3 different environments that all behave slightly different. Sorry. So our 3 environments are development, test, and production. So I'll just put that at the top left here. Let me move this diagram. Let's move this. Why did I not get those ones? Let's move that right there. Okay, so let's first talk about the development environment. Actually, let's go back here. So in our development environment, what all is involved with the development environment? This is our Rails server. This is localhost 3000. This is your Rails console. So all of these things are if you're running your Rails server, if you're visiting localhost 3000, if you're working in a Rails console, you're working in the development environment. In the development, the web browser is on your computer. So it's on your local computer. So you open your laptop, you open up Google Chrome, that is your client. And the Rails server in your development is more specifically running on your local computer. So both the client and the server are running on your local computer. So this HTTP request essentially goes from your computer to your computer. So it really never leaves your computer. Everything is happening just on your specific computer. So I could draw here, I'll probably need to erase this because this will be really bad, but I could draw like a big computer around here. Just to illustrate, all of this is happening on the same computer. So I'm going to go ahead and undo that. redo that. Localhost 3000 for this reason is known as, I'll put this down here, this is known as the loopback address. So localhost, and maybe not localhost 3000, but localhost specifically is the loopback address. So loopback as in my computer sends a request to localhost, it loops back to my computer. So my computer sends and receives that request. You might have also seen this address spelled out as a full IP address. The full IP address is 127.0.0.1. You don't need to know this, but if you have seen this before, maybe this will connect back to something you've seen before. So 127.0.0.1 is an IP address that says that is my own computer. Okay. I don't see any hands up, so I think I'm going to keep going here. Yeah. So next, let's talk about the test environment. Oh, one other thing that I could add in here that deals with the development environment is your Rails DB seed. So when you run Rails DB seed, that is seeding just your development environment. Another really important point here is that when we talk about these environments, each environment has its own database. So maybe I could represent that as this, this star over here. In our development environment, this is this database is called whatever our app name is. I'll put that over here, _ development. That doesn't look very nice. I think that's good enough. So each environment has its own database. So if you're in the development environment, so you're running your Rails server, you're visiting localhost, you're looking at your Rails console, you're working in your Rails console, or you're running Rails DB seed, all of those commands are going to affect the development database. Okay, so now let's move on to the test environment. So in the test environment, the way that we interact with the test environment is by running RSpec. That is the only way that you really affect the test environment. Anything else where you're not running the tests, not affecting your test environment. In the test environment, the database name is going to be your app name _ test. So that's the name of the database, completely separate database. The client, well, actually, let's do the server first. The server is a Rails server that is running on your computer, so nothing changes about the test environment. And that kind of indicates why testing is important. We wouldn't want testing to be completely different than development. So the test environment and the development environment are both running a Rails server for you. The difference between the test and the development environment is that the server is started automatically when you run your tests. You don't have to say Rails server. It'll just automatically, when you run RSpec, it starts a server and it tests your app. The client in this case, the thing that's actually interacting with our app is a web browser still, but it's not just any web browser. Now it is a headless web browser. And the specific headless browser that we're using is Capybara. I don't know why that's blue, but we'll roll with it. So Capybara is just like a web browser. It doesn't have a visual component. It just runs the execution of the commands behind the scenes, but there's no like visual browser that you see. But you can still think of it as a web browser that's automatically testing. It's using your application and interacting with your tests. So this is everything that you've been working in so far. Any questions about this? I want to make sure that we're clear on this before we move on to our new environment, which is production. Aaliyah?
Just curious about the last thing you said about Capybara being our headless web browser. Are there like other versions that we might see out when we're like on the job, other versions of, since Capybara is like a gem that we installed, are there other gems that have a similar functionality that we might see?
Yes. I'm trying to think of some examples. I know Selenium is one. I don't know if Selenium is technically a headless browser. I think it's more of like a headless JavaScript engine. But anyway, we don't need to get into that deep into it. But the answer is yes. There are other types of web browsers or headless browsers that are used in testing, especially if you're working in a different tech stack. So if you're not working in Ruby and Rails, probably not going to use too much Capybara. Let's if I Google Capybara browser. I don't want to see pictures of capybaras. And I know y'all can't see what I'm doing. So if I look at the Capybara docs, it says it is agnostic about the driver running your tests and comes with rack test and Selenium support built in. So I think that what that indicates is if you are testing a rack-based app, we haven't talked about rack, don't worry too much about it. But if you're testing a rack-based app, then you would use this. But anything else that's not rack-based, like React, like the front-end team is doing, or the front-end students are doing, you would not use Capybara. Natia.
Are you going to speak at all the QA environments?
All the QA, can you say more?
Like the quality assurance environments that stands between test and prod?
Yeah, I would say that no, I won't talk about them too much, but they are important. So yeah, a lot of times you'll have like a fourth environment that's called staging that kind of sits in between test and production. But we are not going to get into that. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about production. So here's where things get much more interesting. So production is going to be our Heroku environment. The key thing that production does for us is production makes our app accessible on the web. So up to this point, I've described Rails server running on your local computer. Once we move into production, that is no longer true. So let me take out some of this stuff over here. So we still have a client and a server, and we're still running a Rails server, but now this Rails, oh wait, where did my box go? I deleted my box. Oh, that's what I did. I added text inside a box. Okay, so this running on your local computer, no longer true. As soon as we deploy our application, I'll put that down here. This is referred to as deploying an application. Now, this is a Rails server, but it is running on a remote computer somewhere in the world. It's running somewhere, it doesn't really matter. The point is it's not on your computer anymore. This is the point when we take code out of your computer and we put it out in the world. It's running, it's still a Rails server, it's still doing all the normal Rails server things. It's just now that it's running on someone else's computer. The client, in this case, can now be any computer on the internet, which is really the magic of applications. The whole point of Mod 2 is for us to build web applications that are accessible from the internet. So something else that I can draw in here now is that now that we're sending HTTP requests, they're not looping back to our own computer. We're not using that loopback address. Now these requests are going, if I just draw like a big cloud here, these requests are going through the internet. So back in Tuesday of last week, Jameson showed you a diagram of wires, transatlantic wires connecting all computers across the world. Is this ringing some bells? So now think about our requests going through all of those wires to get to our Rails server. So that's what that cloud box is supposed to be, is that represent our HTTP requests are now traveling through the internet. Same thing with the responses, those travel back probably a similar path back through the internet. Our app, our database name is now no longer app name test, it is just app name. So our production database is just the name of our app. That's how it is named. And now that we are deploying to Heroku, Heroku is going to give our apps domain addresses for us to for others to locate our app on the internet. So what our domain is going to be whatever our app name is .herokuapp.com. So now we've gotten rid of localhost. We're not doing a loopback. Now we have a real live domain name that someone can type into their web browser, and that will be routed through the internet and find our server over here. So that domain kind of acts like an address. I could say this server is running on a remote computer and it's identified by appname.herokuapp.com. Regina?
Are you saying by the end of, or well, this project that we're working on now is going to be live?
Yep.
Okay. And usually you have to purchase domains. Is like the .herokuapp.com kind of like a free app, but you're advertising their liveability? I don't know the right.
Yeah, I think what you're asking is like, why does Heroku give us this for free? Like, don't these things cost money, right? Yeah, so Heroku, it doesn't cost them anything, or it doesn't cost them much to give out these domains. The way it works is that Heroku gives you a free domain, but it has to have .heroku app in it. So yes, that does kind of like advertise their services in a way, saying, look, this app is running on Heroku. The other thing is the free versions are very, very minimal. So if you have like 100 users, free version's not going to do it. So they will scale your application for you, but as they give your application more resources, they will start to charge
you. Okay, thank you.
For our purposes, free is totally fine. We're not going to have like a strong user base for our Adopt Own Shop projects.
I feel like I have one more question under that same thing. Oh, I lost it. If I think of it, I'll raise my hand again.
Sure, we'll go to Noah, and if you think of it, let me know.
Just the naming. I'm curious about the naming. Obviously, we're working on projects with all the same name. Does it do it for us? Do we have to do it?
So it will auto-generate a name for you. The names are kind of funny. Like it'll say like silent waterfall or cryptic forest or something. So it will auto-generate a name for you. You can give it a name, but if the name is already taken, you can't take that name. So if you try, like you can go try to sign up for Adopt Own Shop, but that might already be taken. So you could name yours Noah's Adopt Own Shop. That's probably not taken. Regina?
Besides the amount of users that might have like access to it, are there other limitations of what you can do with a free version of an app?
With the free version, I would say, so just terminology here, I would say this is the free version of our of deployment. So the Heroku services are specifically for deployment. I don't think there's anything, there is, I think it gives you a limit to how much data you can store in the database.
I posted
think
it
that's
in
the
the
other
chat. If you want to look at it, I posted in the chat the basic things.
There's a link there too, if
Awesome.
you wanna read that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Natia?
So does Heroku, like, when you say database, like I was under the impression we still have the database on our local machines, but are you saying that's actually like hosted by Heroku at this point, the production database?
So it's a brand new, it's a completely different database. So in the same way, when you and your partner are working on your apps, you each have your own local copy of the database. Same thing with here. This Heroku server is a remote server that has its own production database. So don't think of it as like you can push your data to the database. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I guess my next thing would be like, how do you connect to it? Like, does it allow you to connect to their database with your data in it?
Yeah, so a way that you can insert data into the database is you can use the seed file. So you can use your seed file to seed your production database. But the way that data normally gets into your app is that users use your application. So the way that we would get a new pet in the app in this application is someone would go in and like fill out a form, and that would create a pet in that database.
But if you wanted to like connect Postco or SQL Developer or like SQL Pro to it, could you do it?
I don't think you could connect those sorts of applications. I think that's a little bit too much, but you could. Let me try to show you here. Actually, let me use conveyor belt as an example here. So let me go to conveyor belt. Yeah, sure. So I can run Heroku run, and this allows me to run a command on that remote computer. I can run Heroku run bash. And this will run a bash session, which you can think of as your terminal. It will run a terminal session on that remote Heroku server. So I can do an ls here and see what is stored on this remote Heroku server. I could run a Rails console from here. And I can even see loading production environment. And what do I want to look at here? I think these are called projects. So project.all. I am looking at all of the projects that are stored on this remote Heroku database, which is if I go back to my dashboard, all of these projects that I'm seeing right here. So I'm seeing 86 of these projects on this live Heroku app. You can see conveyorbelt.herokuapp.com. If I do project.count, 86, there they are. So I am looking at the real live running data right now. So can I connect other apps like SQL Server and those kind of things? No, but you can do your Rails things that you know how to do. Postico is the one thing that we've done in class that you're really not going to be able to use. But you can use Rails console, which I think is just as helpful. Other questions? Noah?
You used conveyor belt there. I'm not super familiar with that. Are we going to be using that? Can you talk a little bit more about conveyor belt?
Conveyor belt. Did you fill out the form in the cohort channel? So if you filled out the form, then you've used it. You're done.
Okay.
Let me go to. How are these sorted? This is 2103 adopt don't shop. Yeah, it looks like everybody is in here and everybody's done. So you should have, if you go to your GitHub, you should see your project. Molly?
Just curious about like order of operations. Like when you enter the user stories, it's like the deploy user stories first. Like I guess like in my experience in like business world, like you would obviously never deploy something that was like, I guess I'm wondering about like, would you deploy it for us so that we can deploy like as we go? Is that what like you're thinking about in terms of practicing?
Yeah, so we do want you deploying as you go. So if we go back to the project board, deployed is the last step. So we do want you to go all the way through the process of deploying before you finish a user story. Natia brought up a really good point earlier. Normally, we wouldn't just push things live as soon as we're done developing them. So we'd actually have a fourth environment called staging, which is as close to production as possible without being in production. We don't need to worry about that because we're not like building a real live app that we really need to make sure is like 100% good to go before we release to customers. But that would be the process for a normal business.
Cool.
Regina?
Does that mean we use a combination of Heroku and the local 3000? Like would we like kind of see what's going on local, and then if it's like, and like between that and our testing, then you deploy your changes?
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So you want to be using all 3 environments for finishing a user story. So you TDD it, make sure it works, check it in development, works in development, push to Heroku, check it on Heroku, and then it's completely done.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, y'all. So that's all we have time for. If other questions come up, I'm happy to answer them. I'd really recommend that you take some time today to look through this project, maybe start it, but definitely at least give it a once over so that you can ask questions tomorrow. I don't want to send you all off into the weekend with having like things that you're really, really unclear about. So try to get those questions in tomorrow if you can. All right, that's it. I'm gonna drop a picture of this diagram into your cohort channel as well. All right, thank you all very much.